At the very least, you learned about maggots today. Here's an example from my class when I was a teacher at ICS. I was teaching grade 4. The children, you know, we have many visitors who come to the lab school, and they'll often see a group of children in the hallway. This group are on the landing of the stairwell, and there isn't a teacher around, and they think, okay, come on. Where do you get these kids from? Here they are. You know, they're not even supervised. The teacher's up there, and what I say to them is, you know, when this group of children are reading something that maybe one of them brought in, they're all very interested in this, and it's a whole other level of engagement. They're reading to answer a question that they have, that they are going to be responsible to share with the rest of the group. No one else is doing that reading. And so it completely transforms behavior management, engagement, motivation of students. We also have children design their own experiments. In the Ministry Expectations, one of the benchmark lessons in studying light is to create a solar-powered hot dog cooker. We thought we invented that idea, so it's nice that minds think alike. But we didn't leave this to the very end. Rather, we did this in the middle of the unit so that the students could go back and say, you know, mine didn't really work well, but what I liked about it was that I used this concave shape, and I liked how you used the color black. I wonder if we could bring those elements together in a revised design and really continuing to revise their ideas. You know, when I talk about all ideas are improvable, I feel that's so important. Again, when I speak about my own education or reflect back, the ideas were out there. They were created by intelligent people. My job as a student was to learn other people's ideas. We're hoping through knowledge building that students realize their ideas are wonderful starting points, that most likely they're misconceptions and will need to be revised through experimentation and further research. But that ultimately the ideas they come across in the textbooks and the journals, they're simply the best ideas so far. And opportunities for teachers, like when Pluto was debunked as a planet, are wonderful chances for us to say, we had it all wrong, and some of you knew that. We didn't listen. You were saying the orbit was completely different. And, you know, I wonder what other theories you're going to be changing for us, so that children themselves see themselves as contributors. When you save a note on Knowledge Forum, you're not saving, you're contributing. This is a portfolio note. It's actually 1/3 of a child's portfolio note in one of my grade 4 classrooms. And you can see the level of content knowledge. So it's about process, but also about content. And of course, the teacher can't be in a knowledge building environment without becoming a knowledge builder herself or himself. And so I needed to figure out what were my short-term goals. How was I needing to change as a teacher in order to teach this way? I was fortunate to stay in grade 4 for quite a few years. After many years on the board of bouncing from school to school and grade to grade, I felt, oh, you know, this was such a luxury. And after the 3 years, I realized I had collected quite a bit of data, and we thought, well, why not examine this data? Had I known I was embarking on a longitudinal study, I would have designed much better assessment methods, but that's not how it always works. And so the data for the 3 years that was collected were notes on the database. They were a pre and post test. My design used to be to give children sort of a survey before we engaged in a unit to see what they knew, and then give them a similar version of that test at the end of a unit. Portfolio notes, our talks were videotaped, and their notebook entries. And in year 1, I realized that, you know, I thought I was a child-centered learner. I thought I was really responding to the students, but it took me the whole year to figure out that I wasn't. I had placed children in groups. They were very static groups. It was a lot of work to maintain the momentum for those students, and so really it wasn't the most successful year. In year 2, I wanted, again, children were working in interest groups when we were studying light, but I made sure that they were reading the notes of the children in the other groups so that they were developing a breadth that was they were developing a depth that was in a breadth of understanding, that they were making connections to the other theories and the other areas of the study of light that the other groups were doing. And this is an example of a view that was created. You can see how children were aware that other children from the class were going to be reading their notes. And again, the quality of their notes where children were coming together to understand particle wave theory, how light travels. And then in year 3, I tried something that was really radical. I thought it was my last year at the Institute, so I thought, well, let's give it a try. And I didn't place children in groups. I made it as fluid as possible. On a daily basis, children would identify what they were going to research in the area of light. And they would bring in readings, and there was a little bit less of the teacher control. It was incredibly uncomfortable for me. I was the teacher, you know, again, thinking I was great, but I would stand in a science class in the public school system and say, everybody take out your notebooks. I'm now going to pour this solution into this solution. Oh, isn't that amazing? Look at that. Now write that down in your notebooks, please. You know, it was very much, or I would design experiments and the children were doing the experiments and there was a right answer to that experiment. Here, it allowed children to really design experiments that were testing out their theories, that were helping them with their understanding. It was difficult for me to watch the child with the mason jar, sand, water, agitating the water. To me, it just looked like play, and the principal's going to walk by any minute, and what am I going to say? And then the child says, I've got it, I've got it. Can I, do you mind if I bring this at our KB talk, or knowledge building talk? Sure, what is it? Well, look, when the water has set, when the sand has settled to the bottom and I put a flashlight, that's called transparent. But when I agitate the sand and some of those particles are blocking, that's translucent. And when I fill this mason jar with mud and leaves from outside and put a light and nothing shines through, that's opaque. That child had internalized those concepts of the materials and how they interact with light in a very, very deep way, because that child played with that concept. And that playing takes time, and it takes a trust in children. And so I was able to look at some of the things. The portfolio notes that the children wrote were rated by an independent source, and there was moderate growth in the 3rd year. That when we looked at the things like percentage of notes that have been read by users, there was an increase there. When I looked at the post-test and pre-test, again, more gains in the 3rd year. The unique thing, probably the wonderful thing and the most terrifying thing about working at the lab school at the University of Toronto is that your work is part of a larger research project, and others can then look upon it and assess it. And that's what happened one year at AERA. Zhangwei Zhang presented this work, and I wasn't there, but people came back and told me about it, and I was terrified. This is, when he looked at the interactions that happened in that year 1, there I was, smack in the middle. These are those groups, those interest groups. I don't know what was happening with this group. That's pretty, revealing information here. But they're interacting, yes, amongst themselves, but through me. And again, that was really powerful for me to see that. In year 2, children started to cluster more towards the center. So the connections between all of them, I'm still fairly much in the center, but so are they. And then what was fascinating, and the happy ending to the study, is that in year 3, we're almost on the circumference of a circle, where children are really interacting. Teacher becomes a co-learner, seen as a co-learner in the classroom. Yes, a source of some information, but not the only means of information, not the only authority figure. Many people are becoming experts in different areas and connecting. Again, other forms of assessment. This was the inquiry, mean number of inquiry themes about which a student reported knowledge advances in his or her portfolio note. This is all data that was done, analyzed years after those 3 years. But again, I benefit, and I hope that you see, I hope no one will take anyone 3 years to do this. Now that it's been analyzed, I'm hoping that people can make this change in a much shorter time. Also, student ideas were rated based on scientificness and depth of complexity. Again, we see the difference in year 3. This connects us to this idea of assessment, and I'm often asked, well, how do you assess what children are doing? And what's wonderful is that KF, this knowledge forum, has this what they call embedded. It's in the actual database. It's transformative because I believe assessment needs to be transformative. Too often, assessment is simply about informing the teacher about what the children know. But it's not really about having the child understand what the child knows. what the child has done well. My children are in regular public school, and this becomes a conversation we have often with teachers there about, understanding the impact of assessment on children, sometimes negative impact, where children, and when information isn't given in time for children to use that, where it's not authentic for children. And so this, I'll give you some examples. Children can look at, these are all the names of children on a database, and they can look at how many times have I connected with somebody else, and they can increase the threshold. So this might be how many, once or 10 times. And then the numbers, the connections start to decrease. This looks like one of those spiral things that we used to make as children. And then children start to reflect. I'm noticing I'm reading mostly the notes of these 4 other students. And think about, what does that mean? Is that because they're the best at multiplication, and then I think that means that they have the best theories? Or is it because that's my twin brother, or those are my friends? Conversations about why are we doing this, making the choices that we're making. This allows the children, as well as the teacher, at any point in the process, to pull up this tool and let's look at our vocabulary. And this isn't a perfect tool, but how many basic words, how many misspelled words, what are the advanced terminology that we're using in our notes? And so the children get this information. I really liked this one. I call it a Venn diagram, although it doesn't look anything like a Venn diagram. This could be, for this set, could be what the children have selected. It could be their notes in a view. This could be the minister expectations. And then they see where's the overlap. And I remember when we first did this, there wasn't very much overlap. And then the children were really upset about that. But then when they really looked at it, they said, well, we might have different variations of a word that's in the ministry expectation. It doesn't mean that we haven't covered that. We absolutely have, and we've covered it very deeply. And so that was very interesting. I'm very interested also in how Knowledge Forum allows all types of learners to enter into it. I told you that the notes allow children to draw, allow children to write, and I believe you can even record your voice in it as well. And that there isn't a set quantity. Everybody's question is valuable. And then and the thing is, theories start to die off if they're not being supported, and other theories get energy and they continue to build. And so students are constantly contributing. We need everybody to be contributing. And I've had, at ICES, we don't screen any of the children for academic abilities. And so what that means is that everyone sees himself or herself as a valuable contributor to the collective understanding. But there's one specific type of special education use of KF that we've been exploring, called the DIEP, a dynamic IEP. Everybody's aware of what an IEP is, right? Okay. And so a few years ago, we had a child with Down syndrome who's currently still in the school, and we were created an IEP, but we know that IEPs sometimes, the nature of an IEP is that it's placed somewhere, and wonderful, good teachers are referring to it, but it's, it still has to be pulled out of a file or put somewhere. And we thought, well, how about exploring the use of Knowledge Forum technology to make that more dynamic? And so these are ways that it's dynamic. It constantly can be changed. It's referred to almost on a daily basis. And depending on appropriateness, it could involve the parents as well. And in this case, the parent is on that program. And so here's an example of the child's IEP. And so they're communicating. We have specialty teachers who are on here. When I say specialty, the French, the phys ed teacher, we have the classroom teacher, the educational assistants, and because it was appropriate this time, parents of the child. So a wonderful, and you can see the gains that would be happening because the information is current and everyone is accessing the same information. We are now trying this out in about with 4 or 5 other students in the school, and this has sort of gone into other schools as well. We're very happy about that. I also want to tell you that we're really interested in smartboard technology. We were given a grant to purchase 2 smartboards, and then when smartboard people came, they became to visit our school. They were very interested in our way of using smartboard because really any form of technology can be used in a traditional transmissional way. It, you know,